It started out as something completely ordinary. Ryan had just gone through a messy breakup, and I offered to help him stay focused by joining his new fitness routine. He said he needed someone to keep him accountable, and I, married, bored, and quietly restless, said yes before thinking twice. Sophie, my wife, barely noticed. She'd been buried in work for months. We lived under the same roof, but it felt like two strangers sharing rent rather than a couple building a life. Ryan and I had been friends since college. He'd always been the outgoing one, charming, confident, the kind of guy who could light up a room. I admired that about him, maybe more than I should have. After work, he'd stop by my place, gym bag slung over his shoulder, smile easy and unbothered. Sophie would nod hello on her way out to another late meeting, and then it was just us in the living room, clearing space for dumbbells and resistance bands. At first, it was harmless. I needed the distraction. The rhythm of training gave me something to hold on to, counting reps, exchanging jokes, feeling useful again. Ryan's energy was contagious. When he laughed, the room felt alive in a way it hadn't in a long time. He'd tease me about my form, correcting me with a playful shove to the shoulder. I'd roll my eyes and call him coach. The banter came naturally, but there was something underneath it, something unspoken that neither of us wanted to name. One evening, the power flickered out mid-workout. The house went dim except for the faint streetlight leaking through the window. Ryan grinned and said, "Guess we'll call it a night." But instead of leaving, he stayed, sitting cross-legged, on the floor, scrolling through songs on his phone until a slow one filled the quiet. I sat across from him, breathing hard, heart still racing from the sets, or maybe from him. He started talking about his breakup, how it ended without closure, how he missed being seen by someone. I nodded, understanding too well. Sophie and I barely spoke beyond schedules and bills. He asked, "You ever feel like you're in a relationship, but still alone?" I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Every day. We fell silent after that. The song changed, and I could hear the rain starting outside. Something about that sound made the space feel smaller, closer. Ryan looked at me and smiled faintly, like he was about to say something else, but he didn't. He just leaned back on his hands, muscles flexed in the dim light, casual and unaware, or maybe perfectly aware, of the effect he had. I looked away first, pretending to check my phone. Later that night, when I climbed into bed, Sophie was already asleep, her back turned. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about Ryan's voice, about that moment of silence that had stretched too long to be comfortable. I told myself, it was just friendship, just two guys helping each other out, but my chest ached in a way I couldn't explain. The next morning, I found a message from him. "Same time tomorrow?" My thumb hovered over the reply. I knew I should say no, that I needed to put distance between us before I started feeling something I shouldn't. But instead I typed, "Yeah, sure." That day, Sophie left early and didn't notice me at all. Her absence made the apartment echo. By the time Ryan arrived, music playing from his phone and a grin on his face, it was like flipping on a light in a dark room. He asked how my day had been, and I said fine, though it hadn't been. He didn't press. He just tossed me a water bottle and said, "Let's sweat it out." We worked harder that day, pushing past exhaustion, laughing through the pain. Every time our eyes met, it lingered. When he adjusted my posture, hands on my shoulders, guiding my arms into place, his touch burned hotter than it should have. My pulse jumped. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did, and chose not to say anything. When he left, the apartment felt emptier than before. I found myself replaying the evening in my head. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. The easy warmth between us. The feeling of being seen again after so long. It scared me. It shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. That night, I lay beside Sophie again, watching the faint light spill through the curtains. She murmured something in her sleep and rolled away. I turned toward the ceiling and whispered into the dark, "What's happening to me?" But deep down, I already knew. The next few days moved in a blur of routine. Work, errands, quiet dinners with Sophie, then the workouts with Ryan that filled the empty spaces in between. Each time he came over, the apartment felt lighter for a while, laughter echoing off the walls, music playing, sweat and focus pushing away the silence that usually hung over the place. But even as I laughed with him, a heaviness stayed in the back of my mind. I started noticing the small things I'd ignored before. How Sophie would check her emails during dinner, how we rarely made eye contact, how I always felt the need to fill the quiet with something else. Ryan had become that something else. One evening he showed up earlier than usual. I was still sitting at the table, a half-finished cup of coffee beside me, and a report open on my laptop. Sophie had just called to say she'd be staying late again. Ryan leaned against the doorway, grinning. "Guess it's another guys' night workout?" I smiled back, but something in me flinched at how easily that phrase rolled off his tongue. I closed the laptop and stood. "Yeah, guess it is." We started stretching in the living room. The television flickered silently in the background, some late-night talk show with the volume muted. The hum of the city seeped through the window, horns, faint music, life going on outside while mine felt pause somewhere between contentment and confusion. Ryan kept talking, but I barely listened. My thoughts circled the same questions. Why did I feel more myself around him than I did with Sophie? What did that say about me? "Hey," he said suddenly, snapping me back. "You good?" "Yeah, just tired." He nodded, giving me that easy, understanding smile that always seemed to make things feel less complicated than they were. "Then let's take it light today. Sometimes it's not about pushing harder, it's about showing up." That line stuck with me. Showing up. It was something I hadn't done for Sophie in months. Maybe years. After the workout, we sat on the floor catching our breath. Ryan scrolled through his phone and started telling me about a new job opportunity. I listened, but my mind wandered again, to the way my life had become divided between two worlds, one quiet and distant, one alive and temporary. "Thanks, man," Ryan said suddenly, looking up, "for keeping me on track. I don't think I'd be doing half this stuff if you weren't around." I nodded, but his gratitude hit me deeper than it should have. "You're doing the work. I'm just here." "Nah," he said, shaking his head. "You show up." There it was again. The same phrase, and I realized how much weight those simple words carried. That night, after he left, I sat alone on the couch staring at the wall. The silence was back, thick and familiar. I tried to read, tried to sleep, but my mind replayed every conversation we'd had. It wasn't attraction I felt. It was the hunger to be seen, to matter again. Ryan saw me in ways Sophie hadn't in a long time, and that frightened me. The next morning, I decided to make an effort with her. I got up early, made breakfast, and left a note beside her coffee. "Miss talking to you. Let's do dinner tonight, no work, just us." When she saw it, she smiled, tired but touched. "Dinner sounds nice," she said. That evening we actually sat across from each other without phones or laptops between us. For the first time in months, conversation came easier than expected. We talked about her projects, my job, even laughed a little. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I realized how little we'd fought to keep this connection alive. After she went to bed, I checked my phone out of habit. A message from Ryan blinked on the screen. "Workout tomorrow?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at it, realizing how much space he'd begun to take in my thoughts. None of this was his fault. He was just a friend. But the way I'd leaned on him wasn't fair to anyone, least of all Sophie. The next day, when Ryan came by, I told him I might take a few days off. He didn't ask why. He just nodded. "No problem. Take care of yourself, man." It was such a simple response, but it left me strangely hollow. After he left, I felt the absence of his energy. No music, no laughter, no easy distraction from everything I didn't want to face. The quiet returned, but this time I didn't run from it. I went for a walk instead, thinking about how easily comfort can turn into dependence. Maybe infidelity doesn't always start with a decision. It starts with neglect, with two people forgetting to reach for each other. until someone else fills the silence. That night, when Sophie came home, she found me in the kitchen making tea. She looked surprised. "You're still up?" "Yeah," I said, smiling softly. "Just wanted to talk." She leaned against the counter, curious. For the first time in a long while, I met her gaze and didn't look away. The next week passed more quietly. I kept my promise to take a few days off from workouts, using the time to focus on things I'd let slide: reading, cooking, even tidying up the spare room that had turned into storage. It felt strange at first, moving through evenings without Ryan's music echoing in the background, but slowly the stillness stopped feeling like emptiness. It started feeling like space, Sophie noticed. She began coming home a little earlier, helping me cook, asking small questions that had disappeared from our conversations months ago. "How was your day? Did you eat lunch?" They were small things, but they meant more than I could admit. One night she reached across the table and said softly, "I miss this. Us." I nodded, realizing I'd missed it too. We weren't suddenly healed, but we were at least looking in the same direction again. I started talking more, about work, about feeling disconnected, about how easy it is to drift when you stop paying attention. I didn't mention Ryan by name, but I didn't need to. Sophie understood the shape of what I was saying. A few evenings later, my phone buzzed. "Ryan again. Back at the gym, you in?" I stared at the message for a while. I could already picture the grin behind it, the easy rhythm we'd built, the comfort of familiarity. But I also knew how easily that comfort had blurred my boundaries. I typed slowly, "Maybe later. Need some time to sort things out." He replied almost instantly, "All good, man. Take the time you need." It was a simple exchange, yet it felt like closing a door gently instead of slamming it. Days turned into a week. I ran alone, jogged through the park near our apartment, let the wind fill the spaces that had been crowded with thoughts I couldn't name. With every step, the noise inside my head got quieter. For the first time in a long while, I felt okay being alone with myself. One afternoon, I saw Ryan across the park, working out by the benches. He noticed me, waved, and I walked over. There was no tension, just a calm kind of understanding. We talked about work, about his new plans, about how he'd been doing. The conversation was easy again, but this time it didn't carry that charged silence between words. It felt honest. Before we parted, he clapped my shoulder. "Glad you're doing better?" "Thanks," I said. "You too." Walking home afterward, I realized how much of the last few months had been about filling a void instead of facing it. Ryan had reminded me of what connection could feel like, but it wasn't his responsibility to give me that. It was mine, to build it, to nurture it where it truly belonged. That night, I told Sophie I wanted us to take a weekend trip. No phones, no work, just us. She hesitated, surprised, then smiled and agreed. We drove to a quiet lakeside cabin 2 hours away, a place we hadn't visited since our first anniversary. The cabin was small, the air crisp, and the lake reflected the evening sky like glass. We cooked simple meals, went for long walks, and talked about the years we'd lost to distraction. Sophie admitted she'd felt the same distance, but hadn't known how to reach through it. We both realized that somewhere between responsibility and routine, we'd stopped choosing each other. On the last night there, we sat by the fire in silence, watching the embers fade. I thought about how close I'd come to breaking something precious, not through actions, but through neglect, through quiet longing turned in the wrong direction. When we returned home, life wasn't magically perfect, but it felt real again. Sophie still had long workdays, and I still caught myself checking my phone out of habit, but now we noticed those moments. We called them out before the distance could grow. Every so often, Ryan would text, short updates, memes, nothing deep, and I'd reply with the same lightness. Our friendship had found a healthier shape, grounded in respect instead of unspoken need. Months later, I passed by that same park again. Ryan was there with a group of new friends laughing. He waved from across the field, and I waved back, smiling. It wasn't complicated anymore. Just two people who had once helped each other through a lonely season. As I walked home, the sun dipped low, turning everything gold. I thought about how easily people slip into patterns, how loneliness can disguise itself as connection, and how what feels like temptation is sometimes just a mirror showing what's missing in your life. In the end, it wasn't about Ryan at all. It was about learning to show up where I truly belonged.